Thank you for joining our webinar on ERA's Small Producers Energy Efficiency Deployment Funding, part of the Energy Savings for Business. We're glad you could join us so we can share this great opportunity with you. We're excited to announce that the program launched Tuesday and we're open to applications. Hopefully today's discussion can help you prepare to take full advantage of what the program is offering. My name is Luca Youngin, and I'm the Program Manager of the Energy Savings for Business Program for Emissions Reduction Alberta, or ERA. I'm here with Heather Stevens, Emission Reduction Alberta's Chief Operating Officer, and Carson Brown, Support Manager with Enerva Energy Solutions. Enerva helped design the program with ERA and will continue to support application intake and processing, outreach, and incentive application review. Heather, Carson, and I will be trading off today as we talk about ERA's recently launched Small Producers Energy Efficiency Deployment, or SPEED for short, funding. Following the presentation, we'll all be here for the Q&A period, along with Mark Huot, ERA Program Director, and Myron Shrikantha, Program Support with Enerva, to answer any questions you may have. Before we get into the agenda, I'd like to start by going through a few housekeeping items just to make sure we get the most out of our time today. First of all, we're expecting quite a few attendees today, so everyone's microphone should be muted to avoid unintentional background noise. If you encounter technical challenges related to the webinar connection, or if you need to leave early, we'll be posting a recording of this webinar on the SPEED website. The recording will include both the presentation and the live Q&A with audio. For our agenda today, first, Heather will talk briefly about ERA and our mandate. Next, we'll provide an overview of SPEED funding. We'll also cover some key points about the program, including eligibility, project and measure types, incentive levels, and the application process, including a demonstration. We'll then make sure to leave enough time for our Q&A session. With that, it is my pleasure to turn things over to our COO, Heather Stevens, who will get things started with an overview of ERA.
Thanks, Luca, and thank you for joining us today. Looking at the number of people attending the webinar, we're very pleased with the level of interest in this program. I want to briefly share some background about Emissions Reduction Alberta before Luca and Carson dive into the details of SPEED. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions while supporting the economy benefits everyone. And ERA's vision is anchored in the belief that our success is measured in both economic and environmental terms. Since 2009, ERA has invested the proceeds from the price on carbon paid by large emitters. Our investments help innovators develop and demonstrate GHG reducing technologies that lower costs, improve competitiveness, and accelerate Alberta's transformation towards decarbonization. We identify opportunities that have the greatest commercialization potential and deliver the maximum positive impact. Over the past decade, ERA has committed $796 million toward 220 projects worth a total of $6.5 billion. The projects are on track to deliver cumulative GHG reductions of 42 million tons by 2030 and help create the equivalent of over 31,000 person-year jobs in Alberta by 2025 and contribute over $4.6 billion to Alberta's GDP. Those numbers grow to over 43,000 person-year jobs and $6 billion GDP contribution if we look to our impact in Canada as a whole. Alberta is taking action. Our investments provide a clear line of sight from the carbon price to the solutions needed to achieve continued economic and environmental success for Alberta. Some of our biggest investments have been in the oil and gas industry, areas like partial upgrading and advanced recovery techniques, but our portfolio spans across sectors and timeframes, from utility-scale wind and solar projects to promising new energy storage solutions. We support innovation in food, farming, and forestry that helps improve the cost and carbon competitiveness of these sectors. And while we are accelerating the de-risking and deployment of game changers like carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, and artificial intelligence, our typical focus has been very much on pre-commercial technologies at the pilot, demonstration, or field testing stage. With the announcement in November 2020 of the Energy Savings for Business program, and most recently, this SPEED funding, we have broadened our portfolio scope to include investments that will accelerate the adoption of commercially available technologies that help businesses cut costs and reduce emissions. These are extraordinary times, and ESB is one piece of the province's response to help businesses navigate the challenges they are facing. It has and will continue to provide much needed economic stimulus and help get people back to work. It will also help demonstrate Alberta's continued commitment to being a leader in sustainable resource and energy use. We know that support for small and medium-sized businesses needs to be streamlined in order to encourage participation. So the funding and eligibility expansion for oil and gas producers offers a simplified application process, expanded technology lists, and clear and comprehensive information about eligibility. I'll now hand it back over to Luca to share more details about the program.
Thank you, Heather. On November 2nd, 2020, ERA announced up to $55 million in funding from the provincial and federal governments to support cost-saving and emissions-reducing projects in Alberta. This funding is sourced from a combination of the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction, or TIER Fund in Alberta, and the Federal Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund. SPEED is aimed at small and medium-scale industrial and commercial facilities in the province, of which oil and gas are always a part of. We designed the Energy Savings for Business program with 4 core purposes in mind. ESB will result in job creation and the preservation of jobs, more competitive Alberta businesses, an economic boost, and support our province's economic recovery. And we're going to do all this while supporting technologies and projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address Alberta's longer-term sustainability goals. Expanding eligibility to include tier-regulated and aggregated facilities through SPEED will get these purpose-driven funds driving new investments as soon as possible. As mentioned, the new SPEED funding will build off the existing ESB program, which is still currently in market. Participants in SPEED will also be able to access the 60+ technology types available in the ESB program. This new stream targets oil and gas producers. The streamlined application process, which we'll go over in detail in this presentation, will require you to submit your application during an intake window. Once the window closes, we will evaluate and rank applications based on a set of criteria and inform successful applicants. As part of the application process, you'll need to enter details on your project. The funding will have a set list of technologies for which you can apply to receive financial incentives that will help offset a portion of your project costs. This list includes all existing measures from the ESB program, air fuel ratio controllers, this is lean burn, rich burn, and rich burn to lean burn conversion, high efficiency engines, so engine upgrade and new engines replacing old engines, and pump jack conversion, so conversion to electric drive and pump off controllers. As you enter project information, the GHG savings and financial incentives are pre-calculated. There are application checklists on the website that provide additional detail on what information needs to be submitted. We strive to make the application process as streamlined as possible. For successful applicants, the incentive funding will be awarded after project completion. For clarity, we are not planning to offer milestone payments. Participants will receive specific dollar amounts for completing installations or upgrades of qualifying energy efficiency measures. GHG reductions will be calculated by the program based on what is submitted within the application and standard emission factors for Alberta. Up to $1 million in incentives will be available per project or company. Incentives will be limited to a maximum 50% of total project costs, which includes the technology, installation, and design costs. I should note that for lighting, incentives will be capped at 25% of project costs. Environmental attributes will be owned by participants in order to meet compliance requirements, but cannot be traded or sold. Before we go into the measures that have been added specifically for oil and gas, we wanted to do a brief overview of all the current measures we have in the program, which you have access to in SPEED. All the measures on this slide are available to participants in SPEED. The measures in dark green are the new measures added specifically for oil and gas. You can also access all the rest. We highlighted a few in medium green that seem to be of most interest. For the measures in medium green, we received a few specific examples of projects that participants might be considering. These include VFDs added to screw air compressors or on high efficiency motors for pump jacks, lighting replacements for buildings and facilities, compressed air, process heating, HVAC if used on site, water heating for any domestic hot water, and combined heat and power for any power and heat needs. This slide provides a summary of the incentives available for the new speed measure categories. The first category is high efficiency engines upgrade. For the upgrade, the scope will include items such as replacing heads, pistons, intercooler turbo, and camshaft, upgrading controls, adding or upgrading the turbocharger, including a jet cell combustor, adding a fuel injection system to help improve with the combustion and prevent methane slip, can be an in-field retrofit or retrofitted back at vendor's facility. For the engine replacement category, a new engine will need to be installed and the old engine must be replaced and removed from operation. For installation of an air-fuel ratio controller on new engines, the controller must be an optional upgrade that has an additional cost compared to a standard engine option that does not have a controller. For the pump jack electrification electric drive conversion, the old gas engine that drives the pump jack must be removed from operation. For the pump off controller, the incentive is capped at $10,000 per controller. To summarize, for the measures on this slide, the incentive will be capped at 50% of eligible expenses. Incentive amounts for other measure categories available in speed will be based on the lesser of the incentive per measure multiplied by the number of measures, or a maximum of 50% of eligible expenses, with the one exception being 25% for lighting systems. I will now turn it over to Carson to provide an overview of speed eligibility.
Thanks, Luca. As noted at the start of the presentation, at a minimum, eligible participants must be an oil and gas producer and be a business, nonprofit, institutional, or industrial organization. Facility eligibility will be based on Petronex codes. The facility must be solely used for commercial or industrial purposes or be a remote industrial facility with an applicable facility ID, Petronex or equivalent. The facility will also need to be located in Alberta, owned, operated, or leased by the participant, in an operation for 1 or more years, and continue to operate for the lifetime of the measure being installed. Now I'll pass it back to Luca to go over the application overview.
Thanks, Carson. This slide provides an overview of our application timelines. We opened to applications on March 8th. Applicants will have 60 days to submit their applications, and the application window will close on May 9th. ERA will evaluate applications in May and then issue pre-approvals for successful projects in June. This provides applicants up to 10 months to complete projects, so up until March 31st, 2023. To establish sound expectations, we would like to share the path to success and what activities are required from contractors and participants. Before we start, we encourage all stakeholders to review the available program resources and to reach out with questions for further clarity. We have resources available on the website to get you started on the right foot and reduce the time it takes to submit an application. The program guidebook and application checklists are available and will be great references to support your engagement with the program. Online pre-project application instructions are coming soon. Last but not least, Application Assist is a free service that is available to applicants which provides step-by-step support to complete your application and reduce the time it takes to apply. If interested, please email speed@esbprogram.ca. Before we get into the application portal walkthrough, we wanted to provide an overview of the entire application process. The first step is to register. This is required for both contractors and participants, who are facility owners, leaseholders, vendors, or engineering firms supporting the project. We only need the main contractor to register. Subcontractors are not required to register. When a participant begins an application, they will initiate the application process through the SPEED portal and identify the eligible contractor they are working with. You must assign a contractor to the project. If your company has staff who have the credentials to do the work themselves, they can register as a contractor and can be added to the applications. The participant will have the opportunity, at their discretion, to invite the contractor to contribute to the application by inputting various details of the project or providing supporting financial or technical documents. Again, the checklists are on the webpage to identify what you will need for an application beforehand. On their own or with the help of their eligible contractor, the pre-approval application is completed by the participant. The participant will then review and submit the pre-approval application, locking it for ERA review. All applications must be submitted by 5 p.m. on May 9th, 2022. After ERA reviews the project, we will issue the decision notification. If successful, the system will notify the participant that the project has been pre-approved and incentive funds will be reserved once the participant accepts the participant terms and conditions. At this point, the application will be unlocked and can be updated as the project moves towards completion. The participant and contractor can then initiate the project, purchasing and installing the eligible measures. Measure-specific expenses cannot be incurred until approval is received from ERA. Generally, the project must be completed within 10 months of receipt of pre-approval. Once the project is complete, the participant will re-engage to update and submit the post-project application to reflect the project as completed. When the application is submitted, it will again be locked for review and the participant will receive notice once approved. When the final application is approved, the participant will provide banking information and should expect to receive payment within 4 to 6 weeks by electronic funds transfer. As you will see in the upcoming slides from the application portal, participants and contractors associated with a given project will be able to monitor the status of applications as they work their way to final approval. Carson, back to you to go over how to submit an application on the SPEED portal.
Thanks, Luca. I'll now walk through the application submission experience to showcase the requirements of a successful application submission and to highlight the usability of the platform. The process to submit an application begins on the participant portal homepage for the applicant and starts with a click of the Start Application button. The Start Application button is located in 2 places on the screen, at the top where it says Start Application, and at the bottom right of the page by clicking the plus symbol. Either way, this generates a prompt to confirm you wish to start a new application. The participant must be the one to start the application process by clicking Start New Application. Step 2 of the process is to select the contractor. If they have registered and been pre-approved, they will be in the drop-down list you see on the screen. If you do not see your contractor in the list, please ask them to complete their registration for the program. At this step, you can choose to give your contractor access to the application so they can help you complete it. If you do not want to give them access, please select No. In this case, they'll be able to view your application but not make any changes to it. Next, the project can be given an application or project name that makes sense to the participant and input an estimated start and completion date. If the project will benefit from other forms of financial support, such as incentives, rebates, or subsidies, the program terms require a disclosure of this information to ensure the project is not funded beyond the rebate caps, which may vary by measure, anywhere from 25 to 50% of eligible expenses. Sources of additional funding support will need to be listed, separated by commas, and the sum of additional funds should be recorded. A participant may start incurring eligible expenses after the SPEED announcement date, which is March 8th, 2022. However, only projects that receive a pre-approval application notice can submit eligible expenses for review and approval. If you do not receive a pre-approval application notice, you will not be able to receive funding for your incurred expenses. When these fields are complete, click Save and Proceed. Next up is step 3. The facility or site where the project will take place needs to be selected, or if not already defined, created. Here you can see an example where we have not yet created any facilities. If you had already created facilities for other projects, you would see them at this stage and you would be able to attach the application to the correct facility, as you will see in a couple slides. If you're creating a new facility, please click Add Facility. After you click Add Facility, you will see the fields on the right side of the screen where facility details can be entered. For example, you would need to enter the Petronix ID. After all details are added, please click Add Facility. If a participant has multiple facilities, they will be able to select between them at this stage. Once a facility is added, please select the facility to attach to the application and click Save and Proceed. When you're ready to enter measures, the layout will look very similar to the facilities layout. This portion of the application will be empty until measures are added. To start adding measures to the application, click Add Measure. You will then start working through a series of drop-downs to identify the measure being installed. The drop-downs are contingent on previous selections, and when a specific measure is ultimately selected, there will be a few unique data points relevant to the measure to be collected to complete the requirements for this particular measure type. Measure checklists are posted on the SPEED website to provide specific clarity for contractors and customers to understand requirements of each eligible measure or installation. For each measure, the quantity installed, equipment and material costs, labor costs, and design costs will also be inputted. All this information will be used to calculate the estimated incentive associated with this measure. When complete, the user will click Get Calculated Values, which populates the incentive calculation for the measure. You will then click Add Measure. The measures will be added to the measure and project summary table. The process as previously described will be required for each measure to be added in the pre-project application. When the measure and project summary is complete or otherwise represents the pre-project application as intended to be submitted for pre-approval, click Save and Proceed. The next step is to upload relevant documents, including cost quotes, a work plan, pre-project photos, simulations or calculations, and any other relevant documents. Drag and drop fields into the gray area or click to prompt the opportunity to add them from your device. When the necessary documents have been uploaded to the project application, you will have the opportunity to review the attachments, rename them to identify them more clearly, or remove them from the project application. When the necessary documents have been added to the submission, click Save and Proceed to review the application and submit for pre-approval. The final step before submission is to review the application summary. It will show you the facility details, measure details, estimated incentive, and any other information about the project. It will also show a summary of the uploaded documents. The participant will need to review the requirements for submission and attest that the information provided is true and accurate. This includes that the eligibility requirements of the participant, the facility, and the intended measures set out in the terms and conditions are satisfied, and confirm that the applicant has not received funds directly or indirectly. Once you have reviewed the requirements for submission, you'll need to select the checkbox located at the bottom of the page to show that you agree with the stated requirements. You then click Submit for review. A prompt will then appear for you to click Yes to submit. You'll receive a confirmation pop-up and email. When the application is submitted for review, it cannot be modified, and the applicant can navigate back to their account page to review application status or submit another application for additional scope at the same facility or for other eligible products at another facility. You'll note the application reference number associated with the application is indicated, which will be the internal reference and may be worth noting. But it is also easy to identify from within the user portal at any time. You will then return to the homepage where you can view all existing application drafts and submissions. Hopefully this walkthrough has been helpful to showcase the application submission process. Before we move on to the evaluation criteria, we wanted to provide a little more detail on our Application Assist service. Application Assist will make applying to SPEED quick and easy. Application Assist has helped contractors and participants submit large and complex projects, and has helped participants and contractors during their first application. Here's how it works. First, reach out to our contact center and let them know you'd like to connect with the Application Assist team. They can help you regardless of your application size or complexity. Next, the team will reach out to you, set up a meeting, and help you build your application step by step. They'll walk through your project, help identify eligible measures, and collect and organize the information you need using templates and resources. Last but not least, submit your application. At this point, you'll have everything you need to quickly and easily submit your application through the program portal. The Application Assist team will still be available to answer any questions you may have along the way. At this time, I'll pass it back to Luca to review the evaluation criteria and decisions in SPEED, and to kick off the Q&A session.
Thanks, Carson. The evaluation process will begin by evaluating applications to ensure they meet the mandatory requirements, for example, eligibility. While ESB uses a first-come, first-serve approach for reviewing applications, for this stream, we will be using a fixed intake period and then ranking applications based on the criteria in the slide. This decision to use a fixed intake period was made as we expect strong demand that could exceed available funding at this time. To help us select projects for funding, eligible projects will be scored and funded accordingly. Criteria for evaluating applications is described as follows. Abatement cost. Applications will be assessed on the cost to reduce GHG emissions. Abatement cost is calculated by dividing the total eligible incentive by the total tons of CO2 equivalent emissions reduced over the lifetime of the measure. Work plan and application. Applications will be assessed on the quality of the supporting documentation, for example, the work plan template. Regional diversity. Applications will be assessed on the project's location in Alberta. To evaluate this criterion, Alberta will be divided into 9 regions. Measure diversity. Applications will be assessed on the measure category type selected in the application. Scoring will be in descending order from measure categories with the fewest projects to measure categories with the most projects. Ability for project to leverage economic benefits, create jobs. Applications will be assessed on the benefits expected from the project, including the demonstrated scale of investment, so ERA funding to participant contribution leverage ratio, and economic benefits, job creation, determined based on total project costs. These decision criteria are consistent with the outcomes we are targeting in the ESB program. Following the evaluation, applicants will be notified via email of the outcome. Successful applicants will receive a pre-approval notice and will be required to agree to the participant terms and conditions. After project completion, you'll need to submit a post-project application for review and approval. The final and most exciting step is, of course, the release of funds. Our final slide before we get into the Q&A provides a summary of key application tips. Please review the application measure checklist carefully. Submit a comprehensive and clear application. Submit by May 9th. There's no advantage for early submissions. Clearly demonstrate that the project will be completed by March 31st, 2023. This can be done using the work plan template. Check the portal, your email regularly during the evaluation period in case we have any clarification questions. You can access Application Assist in our call center for any help with your application. Okay, if you've made it this far, now is your opportunity to ask questions to the program panel. Mark Hewitt, Program Director, has joined us, and Heather, Carson, Myron, and I will answer your questions. If you haven't done so already, please type your questions into the questions section of the control panel, which is typically on the right-hand side of your screen. At this time, I would like to introduce my colleagues, Alison Mostowich, who will moderate the question period, and Portia Baladad, who is behind the magic curtain of this webinar collecting the questions. Alison, what questions do we have so far?
Thanks, Luca. And thank you to everyone who's submitted questions so far. I just wanted to assure you that if we don't have time to get to your question today, you can submit it to speed@esbprogram.ca, and we'll be happy to respond to you one-on-one. Please also note that we'll be using your questions to inform our frequently asked questions, which is part of the website currently. So the first question we have today is the limit of $1 million per company or per project? Luca, did you want to take that one on?
Yeah, sure. So the $1 million cap is per project and per parent company, I guess. So it's one and the same. In the sense, only $1 million cap will apply to the parent company. So say that's X company, and they have, let's say 5 different applications. They will have up to $1 million in incentives available to the SPEED program.
Okay. Does anybody else want to add to that? I think we're okay. Okay. So we had some questions come in at the very beginning, and I want to make sure we get to those. So we have some questions about expenses incurred prior to the pre-approval. So if expenses only eligible if they are incurred after pre-approval. Can you shed some light on that, Myron?
Hi, Alison. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer that question. So with regards to expenses become eligible from the date of program launch, which was Tuesday, March 8th. However, please be aware though that only if your application is approved will those costs be included in your incentive calculation.
Okay, great. And just continuing on with how the application process is going to run. So we had some questions about the contractors in the process. So can the contractor be changed at any point in the process? Carson, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, and no problem, Alison. My understanding is that if a contractor is assigned to that project, we would not have the ability to make that change down the road. Myron, you can comment if we have that ability, but my understanding is that that contractor would be locked into that program or into that application, sorry.
So there's a couple of nuances to this. So when the application is with the applicant, they select a contractor. Now they can choose whether they want to give the contractor access to the application to help them complete it or not. So either the contractor will have view access or they'll actually have the ability to edit as well. Now, please be aware that only the applicant can submit the application at the end and sign the contract. The contractor can't take the last step. Now, if the applicant wants to change the contractor, that is doable, but it's only doable when the application is with you. So if the application has been submitted already, that means it's locked. And then you would have to request for us to unlock the application to be able to change the contractor. But as if the application is unlocked, essentially meaning it has not yet been submitted, then yes, you can change the contractor on the application. So it's a bit of a nuanced answer there.
Okay. And then this is a bit, just a bit further into how contractors interact with the applications. Can the contractor see the progress of the application?
So great question. So if they're given just view access, they'll be able to see what's been completed. So in the pre-project application process that Carson walked through, there's 6 steps. So they'll be able to see from step 4, 5, and 6 onwards. If they're given edit access, then they'll be able to edit the individual steps of the application. Now, what a contractor can see is the status of the application. So for example, say the application is approved, then the contractor will see that status change to approved, for example. So they will be able to see the progress of the application beyond during the evaluation process. Yes, they would be able to see that.
Awesome. Okay. And then we're having a few more questions because we're talking about contractors. We're having some more questions come in about that. So let's maybe stay on this topic for a bit. What if multiple contractors are required to complete a project? What would happen then?
So what we would do there, Allison, is we would recommend that the contractor that is the best able to help you with actually completing the project, we recommend adding them because that would be the most value. Now, multiple contractors are allowed, but only one will be listed on the application. However, expenses for multiple contractors are allowed as per the eligible expenses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a great clarification. Thanks, Myron. So we have a question about who is the contractor, and it's funny, we did talk about this before we actually launched the program. Contractor is a term that's used in the energy efficiency world a lot. So in this world, who is the contractor? And the question sort of specifies, is it the consulting engineering firm, technology vendor, installer? There's lots of different people that we can consider as a contractor. So did you want to provide some clarification, Myron?
Yeah, for sure. So we use the word, as Allison mentioned, we use the word contractors as a generic term. The contractor can be anyone. It could be the equipment manufacturer, it can be the consulting engineering firm, it could be the vendor, it could be the person doing, it could be the company doing the installation. It can be anyone. It's just whoever the applicant thinks will be able to best help them complete the application. That's probably who you want to list. But in terms of what the specific role of that contractor is, it doesn't matter. They just have to be able to agree to the code of conduct, and that's really it.
Okay, that's great. And so last question on contractors, and then we'll move on to onto a different topic. We have a question from someone who is a contractor in here wondering if they are already a registered contractor for ESB, will they need to do a separate registration for SPEED?
Yes,
I can maybe take that. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, Myron, you can take a bit of a breather and I'll jump in on one of the easy ones. That's okay.
Oh, please go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great question. We thought people might ask that since we've been in market now with ESB for over a year. So yes, we will need you to register for SPEED with a distinct email address on the SPEED portal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Luca. So let's talk a little bit about the different measures. We have a question here about Petronex IDs. Is there a Petronex ID for each location? Myron, did you want to take that one, or Luca?
Myron, I can maybe start it off and you can fill in anything that I miss. So what we've provided is a link on the website to a Petronex facility report. And so what that report does is it shows the status and also the ID for all facilities with a Petronex ID. it's a very long list. It's updated regularly. So we're using that list as the go-to list for any facility that wants to be eligible for SPEED. If you have any issues finding your facility on that list, please reach out to our contact center, and we can definitely help you out.
And the one thing I would add there is in the application, where you need the Petronix ID is when you're completing the facility details. So for example, if you're a producer and you're doing 2 different applications at 2 different facilities, then you'd have to provide the Petronix ID for each of those facilities.
Great. Okay, thanks guys. So the next question we have is, will on-site pre and post testing be required to validate emissions reductions on engine upgrades? Luca, did you want to start with that one?
Definitely, yeah. I can start off answering, and then the rest of the team can jump in. So if you have on-site measurements at the pre-project application stage, we're happy to include them in our application evaluation. On-site measures are needed at the post-project application stage for both before and after the project is installed. So as such, the cost to obtain those measurements should be included in your project costs, but you will only need to spend these costs once your incentive reservation has been confirmed.
Great, thanks, Luca. Myron, did you have anything to add to that at all?
No, that was exactly it. We would only really require on-site measurements at the post-project. If you have them at the pre-project stage before your incentive has been reserved, that'd be great. But where we require them is after your incentive has been reserved. We would need them at the post-project application stage.
Perfect.
Maybe I'll just jump in. That only applies to specific measures, right, Myron? So
yeah, exactly. That's a great
would be the engine upgrades or AFRs, for example.
Yes, for sure. Like for example, if you're doing a lighting project, we wouldn't need on-site measurements. It would only be for the, yeah, as Mark mentioned, the engine upgrades and the AFR controllers.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. So let's talk about abatement costs. Do we have an anticipated cutoff level for abatement costs? Mark, did you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I think the answer is that there isn't a specific number. Obviously, it's a competitive process where we're going to select projects that achieve the greatest outcomes with the funding available, and that is a heavily weighted criteria. But no, there's no specific number that's a minimum. We're fairly confident, obviously, that most of the measures, were selected specifically because they do offer a good return on greenhouse gas emissions reductions. But obviously that the specifics will come down to each individual project. And as I said, it'll be more captured through the evaluation process.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mark. Anybody else have anything to add to that before we move on? No? Doesn't sound like it. Okay, great. Let's stick with judging criteria. So we have a question about the ranking of diversity of measures. Can you share a little bit more information on that specific criteria? Mark, I'll start with you, and then Luca, maybe if you want to provide some clarification or additional comments.
Sure. I mean, these criteria are obviously so that the program can achieve the best possible outcomes with the funding available. So first and foremost, the greenhouse gas emissions reduction performance is a key heavily weighted criteria. But after that has been accounted for, a sort of secondary objective of the program is to support a wide range of different project types, different technologies. And so this criteria lets us award sort of a higher score to projects that we're not seeing a lot of. And so basically, once all of the applications have been received, we'll group them by measure category, and the categories that have the least amount of projects and therefore sort of the more unique projects will be scored relatively higher than those that have a higher number of application submissions. As obviously just one of the criteria, this will probably not make a huge sway in the overall scoring, but it lets us sort of differentiate among very similar projects that score equally on otherwise similar performance measures.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we knew this question was going to come up. So I guess there's actually quite a few questions in the chat about this. So can you talk a little bit about the eligibility piece again? So, you know, there's a few people saying that speed is for producers. Is it just for producers, or is it for other facilities as well? Mark, did you want to take that one?
Sure. So eligibility is sort of split into the, I guess, the actual participant, then the facility type, and then the project type. So there's 3 layers. So the participant type has to be a business. So we don't define, you know, you don't have to be a producer-focused business per se. That really comes in at the facility level. So for a facility to be eligible, it has to have an active Petronex ID. So within there's a whole range of facility types that have Petronex IDs. We don't distinguish between any one type. So any facility that has one would be eligible, providing it's active. And then from there, the projects obviously have to be eligible according to the measures. So I think the reason we set it up this way is specifically because the term producer is very vague, and we didn't want to get it wrong. So we've kept it quite broad and fairly open for folks. I think the other key point is if you're uncertain in any way, please do reach out and we can sort of follow up, learn more about what your facility is, and see if there's some equivalent to the Petronex if it should be eligible but doesn't fall under that bracket. Luca, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think that was a great explanation. Allison, I know you had said there's a bunch of questions in the chat, and I'm kind of just leading maybe a bit here, but I'm guessing that someone's probably going to ask next what a small producer is. I mean, I think that provided a good definition about, you know, what the facility type eligibility and participant type eligibility is. So maybe I can just try to get in front of that, even though no one has asked that yet. But SPEED is targeting small and medium-sized businesses through this program design elements. So this includes the eligible measure types, the technology size limit. So for example, a 500 horsepower limit on VFDs, and then also the $1 million incentive maximum per parent company. But yeah, as Mark mentioned, all oil and gas facilities with an active facility code in Petronex are eligible to participate.
You called it. That was exactly the next question that I was going to ask. Okay, so hopefully, I'm just going to say there was quite a few questions in the chat about that. So hopefully that did answer questions. If not, please feel free, like I mentioned, to reach out to us at speed@espprogram.ca. So we have a question about directing payment. So once the project is completed and you're looking at being awarded funding, can you direct payment of funds to contractors, and how would that work? Myron, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Hi, Alison. Yeah, for sure. So how it works for payments is either the applicant can get paid or they can assign the payment to the company they've listed as the eligible contractor. So you can't assign the payment to multiple contractors. The only company you can assign a payment to is the contractor listed on the application.
Okay. Thanks, Myron. And then let's talk a little bit about environmental attributes again. So if the environmental attributes cannot be sold or traded, how is this being enforced? So I think there was some clarification at the beginning of the presentation about how we're treating environmental attributes. So Luca, did you maybe just want to review that again?
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, environmental attributes cannot be traded, sold, or used to generate offset credits. However, they may be used to meet tier regulation compliance requirements in current or in future years. So this would be solely for the tier regulated facility at which the project is being installed.
Okay. And then there was a question about how we're enforcing or monitoring this. So are you able to provide a little bit of detail on that?
I can jump in, Alison, if that's helpful.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
So we're working closely with our sort of peers and colleagues within the government of Alberta on the regulatory branch side. And so given that we have the Petronex IDs and we're aware of the GHG emissions, we'll be communicating with them to share the emissions reductions. Now, practically speaking, most of the participants will be aggregated opted in tier facilities. And so it's generally most likely that all the attributes will be used for on-site meeting the requirements anyway. And so they probably won't have the ability to generate EPCs. But if EPCs are generated, we'll work with the government to basically keep an eye on the specific EPCs that result from our projects and ensure that they're only used. Again, it's something that we're hoping that this doesn't generate any long-term compliance concerns, because it's pretty accommodating to use them for your own self going forward. But that would be one mechanism, and then I guess if we found that there was someone breaking the T's and C's, there'd be some penalties according to terms and conditions. But again, it really is meant to be quite flexible for the aggregated facility to use it for its own compliance. It's really the trading or sale where it would become a challenge.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks for that clarification. So let's talk a little bit about measures again. We just have a question about catalytic converters and if they qualify as an engine upgrade. Luca or Myron, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, Alison, I'm happy to start. So just based on the published measures list, if you take a look at that, what is included as an engine upgrade is if you change, improve, or upgrade any of the following. So the heads, the pistons, the intercooler / turbo, the camshaft, the fuel system, the combustion system, or the control system. So if your catalytic converter project fits into any of those areas, then yes, it would be eligible.
Okay, that's great. And then Carson, I think this is a good question for you. Can you talk a little bit about how we want to see applications? So the question here is, does each facility require a new application? And maybe you can also talk about measure by measure applications as well while you're clarifying that.
Yeah, for sure. So with regards to the application process, you're limited to 1 facility per application. So if you're a producer and you have 10 facilities, then yes, you would have to submit 10 different applications, 1 for each facility. Now, what we do recommend on the measure side is, because we are ranking each application, we recommend that you limit each application to 1 measure each. That really allows that measure to stand on its own rankings. You don't want to, for example, lose a project just because you had 2 measures and 1 did well and then 1 did poorly. So then you lose out because the one that didn't do as well didn't cause everything not to get funding. So we would recommend that you do 1 measure per application as well, but that's up to you.
Okay.
If I can, sorry, just quickly add on to that. As Myron mentioned, that's definitely our recommendation. I guess in a scenario where someone has 2 measures that are interrelated, so just using an example of an engine upgrade and lighting. So you're saying that you'd only do the engine upgrade if you were able to get the lighting project approved as well. In a situation like that, and this might not be very likely, but in that type of situation, we do ask that you try to combine those 2 measures into 1 application, and then just let us know that those are interrelated and that they would both need to be approved in order to move forward.
Great. Thanks, Luca and Myron. Okay, let's talk a bit about stacking limitations. Are there any stacking limitations with this program with other provincial or federal funding sources? Luca, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think someone was starting to answer, but I can definitely start, and then whoever was about to answer can fill in. But yeah, we do not allow stacking with any Pan-Canadian framework programs. So any programs that receive funding from the Pan-Canadian framework. Also any programs that receive funding from TIER as well. So those are the 2 main stacking clauses we have in the T's and C's that are available on our website.
Great. Did anyone else want to jump in on that? I thought I heard Myron try to jump in.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is I understand we just launched the program, but quite a lot of this information will be detailed in the program terms and conditions. Mm-hmm. So section 6.4 will detail the allowances for funding from other sources. Mm-hmm. So I do recommend that everyone take a look at that.
Yeah, that's a really good note. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about application quality. That's one of the criteria that we're looking at. Carson, did you want to talk a little bit about application quality? How would people know that they're submitting a quality application?
Yeah, so thanks, Allison. A big part of this, since it's not a first come, first serve, or first in, first out basis for the incentives, is we're looking to see quality applications. When we say quality, a big part of that is like completeness. So when you're going to submit that application and there's those different components as far as the work plan, the pre-project photos, any calculations or simulations you have on prior emissions, and then spec sheets or any other details we need. So it's much better to submit with all of those details complete and submit a full quality application having all those components versus rushing, not having all those, which would be a bad quality application.
Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, and I guess your expertise in terms of putting together a complete application, what are some of the best resources people can use to put that together?
So a big thing, if anybody's struggling with any part of the application, is definitely reaching out to Application Assist. So we can walk you through any of those pieces that you're struggling with. If you're struggling with the portal itself or you're not sure how to input something, we can help in that way. And then also your contractor is a great resource because, you know, for any of that technical thing, that if you're trying to do it and you don't know what you're doing, often your contractor knows those more technical questions, but definitely Application Assist. And we can let you know anything that you have questions about specifically for that application.
Right, and there's going to be a checklist on the website as well, right?
You bet. All those checklists for the specific measures, you'll be able to find on the website, and they have more details on what's required there.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks, Carson. And I think you actually addressed this question for me the other day. Can you talk a little bit about addresses for the different facilities? Some of the facilities are very remote and don't have specific addresses. So can you just provide a little bit of clarification on that piece?
Yeah, for sure. So you'll be able to, when you enter that facility, you know, those traditional addresses will be easy to input, but we have experience, you know, with multiple rural facilities and different industrial facilities that have not a typical address. So if you're using something like a legal land description and you're inputting that, that helps us, and we can typically locate the facility using a legal land description and go from there. If it's super obscure, some sort of you know, way out there address, it can also be helpful to attach a screenshot of the Google Maps of that location and just put a pin on it, and that can help us. But typically with the facility address as itself and or the legal land description, we're able to locate the facility if it's an atypical kind of address.
Great, thanks. That's a really great clarification. Okay, so we just had a question about horsepower limitation for engine retrofits. Myron, did you want to take a stab at this one? Is there any limit for engine sizes in this program?
That's a great question, Allison. So the upside, the limit was really based on the financial incentive for the program. So it's $1 million. So that's probably going to practically be your upper limit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so no horsepower limit, just basically financial.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, thanks, Myron. I appreciate it. And then we just had a question about total funding for this round of funding. Mark, did you want to talk a little bit about the total funding we have for this particular round?
Yep, this program was announced as a $10 to $12 million initiative. It's funded out of the ESB program, so it's kind of coming under the same umbrella and then making use of that portion of the funds. And then obviously the range just reflects the, I guess, the types of projects and the overall ranking and scoring of what we end up getting as submissions.
Great. Thanks. Okay, and I think we've got time for one more question here. So I'm just picking the question that I think is probably going to be the most helpful. Maybe let's just talk about this webinar. That's a great question, Darcy. Thank you. So this webinar is being recorded. That was the question: is it being recorded and will it be available? So the answer is yes. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the website after probably a few days after this presentation. What we will do is we will send you a link and we'll send it through our newsletter sign up. So if you are interested in receiving notification that this has been posted, you can always check back on the website, but I would also suggest that you sign up for our newsletter, and that's just on the main Energy Savings for Business program page. So with that, that's unfortunately all the time we have questions for today. So, as I mentioned, please feel free to reach out to us. We try to be really quick, really responsive. So Portia, if you wouldn't mind going to the contact information page. Thank you. So here's the contact information for everybody. Again, I'm sure everybody's used to using websites. So our contact information is pretty much everywhere on our website. But as mentioned, we really encourage you to reach out for project ideas if you're not sure if your facility is eligible, if the technology is eligible, or just for help with your application. Our team is ready and willing to assist you. Please do visit our SPEED webpage. That's where you're going to find all of the resources. So the checklist that Carson mentioned, the terms and conditions, the measures list, that's where all of the information is on that single page. And then we've got some frequently asked questions at the bottom too that you can refer to. And the contractor code of conduct is there as well. So if you know a contractor that you work with, or if you have individuals within your organization that can be the contractor for your project, they will need to sign the contractor code of conduct. So you can find that on the SPEED page as well. And we also have a live chat function. So that's probably something that could be helpful as well. So that's everything we have for you today. And like I said, please reach out. Luca?
Thanks, Allison. That wraps up the webinar for today. Thank you, and we wish you luck on your application journey.